Sponsored by Squarespace.
Take a look at this. This is Beledar's concept art, and it shows something that we have not yet seen in-game. It shows stairs that lead from the Priory of the Sacred Flame toward an entrance in Beledar. That's obviously something we haven't seen in-game, but it would not be the first time that we've entered a giant light crystal. Here is Oshu'gun. It's another massive crystal embedded into the ground. With that in mind, let's take a journey inside that crystal to see what we find. Deep below, pale orcs harness the void to control earth elementals like this one, and they actually resemble the void-dominated aberrant deepwalkers that we see in Khaz-Algar. Put them side by side, it's no coincidence. Go further in, and the cave opens into Naru architecture. Oshu'gun is not just a crystal mountain, it is tied to the light, and at its heart we find Kuur, a Naru on the verge of flipping into its void state. And to make sense of this, well, Oshu'gun was not always a ruin. It was in fact once called the Genedar, a dimension-hopping Naru vessel that crash-landed on Draenor. And if you ever wondered why the fleeing Draenei, who left Argus, well, why they ended up in Draenor and met the orcs, it's because they went there on this vessel, which crash-landed. And you've perhaps already noticed a similarity. I'll say their names again. Genedar, Vindikar, Exodar. These are all light vessels, they're all of the same kind, and now we've got Beledar. It sounds very similar, it looks similar, and it's a massive crystal oscillating between light and void, not unlike Kuur, who we saw at the heart of Oshu'gun. And around Beledar we see runes that are so similar to those of Oshu'gun in appearance, in style, that it simply cannot be a coincidence. There is obviously a connection, our brains tell us that, our eyes tell us that, but the Titan Keepers just made that a bit more interesting. Their report at first appears to shatter what we may think, but all of this has happened in the same expansion. It's not Blizzard retconning themselves after 2 weeks. So today, I'm going to make sense of all of it and bring it together, and that's something we're only able to do thanks to today's sponsor. It won't just help you achieve your goals, you'll also have fun. Squarespace has an easy-to-use site builder and award-winning templates, but here are the 3 things that you probably don't know, like everything else that they do. How you can build your site, zero pressure for free, and their new site building tools. Now, those site building tools are big. They're called Blueprint and Fluid Engine, and they're game changers. Blueprint walks you through building your own custom Squarespace template. Squarespace are full of professional designers, so with Blueprint, they guide you through using fonts and colors that all look gorgeous with each other, all while working perfectly across mobile, tablet, and phone. Then Fluid Engine gives you even more customization to make it just what you want, but it still is easy. It gives you a grid of attachment points, it lets you tweak and customize your build, all while making sure, again, it's responsive across devices. And you can just get started building all of that for free today. It's honestly fun. Try making a portfolio for yourself, maybe host your photos. If you're applying to a job, well, if you have a killer personal site, that will make you look like a well-put-together, serious candidate. It's worth doing. So if you go to squarespace.com/Bellular Gaming or click that link, you can just get building today. Have fun, build a site, learn a new skill, and then you can send that site live with code Bellular Gaming for 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. In our last video in this lore series, we followed Brinth and Dagran as they basically rebuilt the Titan discs that we've been collecting. And for a quick recap on that, these discs hold records from the Keeper Arcadis, and those detail the Manifold. It's this network of Titan installations, places like Ulduar, that are designed to shape Azeroth into an actual Titan. And the whole thing may even be top secret, may be only known to Arcadis. And in case you're wondering, we currently can't just go and ask Arcadis, that's because we defeated him in Ulduman in 2005. However, recently, apparently Matthias Shaw has been around the area and says that Arcadis may merely be disabled. But until we wake him up, all we can do is look through his messages. And going through those, we learned that the Keepers fired the Great Forges to heal the world, in a process they call acclimation. The Forge of Wills would bombard the world soul with arcane energy, the Forge of Origination would shape the planet's form, and finally the Titans built the Coreway to examine Azeroth real close. And when they took a look in the Coreway, well, that's where Beledar enters the picture. Looking at Beledar, the Keepers eventually conclude that it was a calcified chunk of the World Soul's energy. In one projection, we see Beledar surrounded by smaller crystals that look like azurite, but in the overall cluster, Beledar is absolutely distinct. Shortly after, Brinth and Dagran speculate that Beledar could be one of those crystals. The thing though is, Brinth isn't really worth listening to here. Not that she's bad, it's just that the Earthens simply don't know. Their edicts literally prevented them from investigating anything, they just maintained the core way. As far as we know, no one looked upon it until the Arathi arrived, and even that tells us something. Arcadis says that it's crystallized world soul, but the Arathi were guided there by a vision from the light. They even worship it, right? It's a part of their religious practice. And between concept art, its physical form, and the runes around it, everything pointed toward it being another narrow-dimensional ship, not a big chunk of crystallized world soul energy, yet the Keepers think and say that it's that. So what gives? What's broken? What's wrong? On the surface, this all may seem very complex, but if we pay attention to what the Arathi have been telling us about how they think things work, and if we've been reading the various journals that we find around Hallowfall, it actually becomes rather straightforward. This is Lady Liadrin. She's the leader of Silvermoon's Blood Knights. They're a group who draw their power from the Sunwell. The Sunwell, by the way, is a font of arcane and light energy. It is two powers mixed together to create something even more powerful. She is in Hallowfall, and she knows that to understand Beledar, she needs to understand the thing that sent the Arathi on their expedition. And that thing is called the Sacred Flame. So let me explain this whole situation. Nearly 3,000 years ago, humanity fought an existential war against the Amani trolls, and they won. They forged the empire of Arathor, and within that empire was Mereldar, a priestess in the war. She was visited by 5 Naru in a vision, and she was taught the virtues of holiness, protection, justice, retribution, and compassion. Paladin stuff. Sometime later, those most devout to her followed a vision across the sea to the other side of Azeroth. They went far enough to be beyond our current map, beyond whatever normally prevents expeditions from returning. They hit land and eventually founded the Arathi Empire. That is where they discovered the Sacred Flame. And this Sacred Flame would send visions to their emperors. Visions that those emperors would follow. Visions that would be useful, forestalling fate, ensuring destiny, all to solidify their position. This empire expanded, and very much it expanded via steel and blood, from all that we can pick up in-game. Time passed, of course, and the current Emperor Thoradin IX received a vision. And in this vision, the flame showed him a final clash between light and dark. He also saw Beledar, and he soon sent an expedition to claim it. The members of that expedition are the Arathi that we meet in-game. And when adventuring in Hallowfall, we overhear a conversation between Liadrin, a novice Blood Knight named Salandria, and Reginald Hornfire, an Arathi lamplighter. And in this conversation, Hornfire explains that Beledar is a powerful source of the light, but not a source of the Sacred Flame. He says that the Sacred Flame is elemental, but not from the Firelands or from anywhere specific. And then he drops a bomb. He says that the Sacred Flame is both holy and arcane. He says holy, he says arcane, and that clicks for Salandria. The Holy Flame is just like the Sunwell, holy and arcane. And the similarities do of course stack up. If you take a look into the history of the Sunwell, you learn that it was seeded using a vial of water from the Well of Eternity. Now the Well of Eternity was originally a big wound in Azeroth left from events a long time ago. Azeroth's natural energies were in there, as were the arcane energy that the Titan's machines bombarded her with. For the longest time, the Sunwell had nothing to do with the Holy Light, and Liadrin's Blood Knights were only able to do paladin things because they basically shackled up a Naru and kinda stole its light. Where things changed, though, is at the end of the Burning Crusade expansion, where the Sunwell became infused with the light, meaning that it was arcane, it was also Azeroth, and it was light. Just like, of course, the Sacred Flame, where we learn that it's arcane, we learn that it's light, and also we learn via Hornfire it is elemental in nature, and elemental, of course, means Azeroth. For me, there are two major implications here. Number one, the Sunwell is extremely important. A direct parallel has been drawn between it and the Sacred Flame. That, of course, matters because the Sunwell is going to be a key part of the next expansion. The other thing it tells me, though, is the Sacred Flame wants to claim Beledar. Beledar, something that is partially of the light. Yet the Keepers say it's of the World Soul. What gives? Well, Turns out even that is a bit of an overcomplication, and there is other Arathi information that helps to explain. Do you remember Palo Alto's Codex of Dimensional Structure? It's a book that we find in Hallowfall, and originally it seemed like it was Blizzard's way of saying, hey guys, cool it with the weird cosmic theories. And in many ways it still feels like that. When you read it, the text comes off as overtly academic and complicated. But at its heart is a core point, and it's a core point that actually helps explain and in a way almost soften parts of the Warcraft lore to make it seem less like this color wants to attack that color. So, in the book, Palo Alto theorized that singular energy types like void or fel are inherently unstable. He suggests that most things in life are stable combinations. Specifically, he says this: the Firelands contains as much magma as it does fire. And his point in saying that is, it's the combination of fire and earth that is stable, thus helping the Firelands to exist. And he goes on to say, that's why the holy radiance of the sacred flame acts as an eternal beacon. According to him, the sacred flame is as powerful and long-lasting as it is because of its stable combination of elemental, of light, and arcane. And I suppose with Beledar, it could be a similar situation. Crystals are indeed stable forms. We know it's related to the light, but from Anduin, we also know it's related to Azeroth and the Radiant Song. The Void Shift is also a new thing. It only started after Sargeras stabbed the world. Now we think when Sargeras stabbed the world, that helped to unleash the Black Blood. And of course, when Beledar turns dark, shadow elementals began to attack from the Undersea. Not shadow spawn, the opposite of a priest's light spawn, but shadow elementals. And as we learned in Dragonflight, the elementals very much are the actual children of Azeroth. And if we put all of these things together, we can begin to make sense of things. Chronicle Volume 1 states that the universe-beginning clash of light and void saw, quote, shards of light scatter across the cosmos, suffusing worlds with life. Beledar absolutely could be one of those. Now, the Keepers think that it's crystallized world soul, but they could have just mislabeled it. All we know is they looked through the coreway and they saw Beledar. When you actually listen to what Arcadis says, he says, we came to realize. That is not word of God fact, that is just what Arcadis thinks it is. And we should remember that these shards of light from the very beginning of the cosmos were in fact way before the time of the Titan Keepers. So the idea that one of those chunks ended up being embedded in a primordial Azeroth, that absolutely fits and makes sense. And because of its very nature and its proximity to the World Soul, well, the connections, such as its connection with Azeroth's Radiant Song, those make sense. Now, we also see it resembles a dimensional ship, with runes similar to Oshugun. How do we make sense of that? It makes sense to me that those primordial shards of light are those dimensional ships, or are the things that would be turned into those dimensional ships. Now, as I see it, looking around all of the different parties such as the Titans and us and the Arathi, I don't think anyone's 100% correct. I think we're pretty much all 80% there, but we can soon figure out that final 20%. And that is what brings me to our next leads, the Order of the Night and the Priory of the Sacred Flame. Because if the Order of the Night are our enemies, then why do we enter the cathedral and fight a whole bunch of light-aligned Arathi? Scattered throughout Hallowfall, we find lore books and artifacts that reveal a range of interpretations on what we should do about Beledar. The first and most obvious to talk about is Elric Leet, who is the founder of the Order of the Night, an Arathi cult devoted to Beledar's dark state. And he was very much hopeless. He wrote in his diary, "All I see is darkness around me, around Beledar. So much of it seems infinite. It is time to embrace the only truth. The light of the star is just an anomaly within its vast ocean of darkness." Beledar got to him and his followers on an existential level, and even though they're dead, obviously Beledar still does transition to its dark side. Now, there are also those who are fighting to spread Beledar's light. A fallen paladin, in his final moments, wrote a eulogy declaring his mission to bring Beledar's light to the dark creeks and chasms of Hallowfall. Another also hopeful account from a scout's journal says this: "This hallowed ground, tainted with darkness, must be charted anew to spread Beledar's light to every corner and past the dark ocean." Of course, Beledar borders a literal ocean, And that actually matters. We've been warned by agents, perhaps of the Void, or maybe just of their own, like this Kraken masquerading as a peculiar fish, that if we ever bring Beledar's light to the depths of Hallowfall's ocean, it will be our end. We do not understand why. Now, that light may not necessarily be a good thing. The Priory of the Sacred Flame makes that abundantly clear. Initially, we're not allowed inside, and that seemed odd. These were just other Arathi. Surely they're our allies. The Priory prepares the Arathi dead before burning, yet the Prioress barred the Arathi from seeing the bodies of their loved ones. And when we finally force our way into the place, we find the Prioress using Beledar's energy to light forge the dead. Yes, to basically turn them into undead thralls. Inside we find a journal from Murpray, and here's what it says. Insights into the Emperor's vision have proved elusive, but the secrets of the Sacred Flame will bring victory both in Hallowfall and within the Empire. Now that victory apparently now involves light forging the undead. Now that is not the light as wielded by Uther or Tyrion or perhaps a paladin in-game. No, that is the light as wielded by, say, Zira. It's expansionary, it's domineering, it reminds us of the stories of Yrel's turn towards darkness. The Priory then are a reminder that the light is not always a benevolent force, and this light radiates from Beledar. They're worshipping the crystal. This is a crystal that resembles ones we've seen before, ones with Naru inside, and of course, a recent Naru we saw, Zira, prove not to be wholly good. And while we're wondering what it is and what's inside it, we even have concept art suggesting that it does have an inside. Whatever it is, it drove the Priory not just to fulfill their mission, but to defeat their enemies, even those within, which does suggest that they're becoming more hardcore. And now that we understand that Beledar in its origin is most likely one of those Chronicle Part 1 crystals that is understood through Arcadis looking through the Coreway to be a thing related to the World Soul, and we know that it's related to the World Soul because of the Radiant Song, but the Arathi, because of the Sacred Flame, are trying to seek it out as a powerful something of the light, all while we think that there is something very potent, perhaps even very dangerous inside. It's relevant that 11.1 is almost definitely going to expand upon this, and that 11.05 sets that up. All signs point towards 11.1 taking us to an island with a big crystal on it, and that crystal is likely the other end of Beledar. The Arathi are right now in 11.05 putting together an expedition, and if you want to learn about that story, you've got to watch this video next.